Yeah.
So welcome to We Are Sunderland, ahead of the start of the new season with myself, Scott Wilson, and Dom Shaw. We're going to have a chat about what's been happening in the last week or so. Dom was up yesterday at Regis Bris's press conference, so we'll have a chat about that. I am soon going to hot-foot it down to Cardiff, so we will have a chat about that too. A little bit of housekeeping first. Shout out to our sponsors here on the We Are Sunderland video cast. That's the Fans Museum in Sunderland, obviously, and Cospex Opticians in Durham. And also, if you are watching us on YouTube, then please like, subscribe, send us any comments. We like to know what you're thinking and what you want to talk about. And if you're listening on one of the various podcast platforms, then rate and review and let us know what you're up to. Well, Dom, it's been a long summer. There's been all sorts of to and fro, but we've made it. We're here, Cardiff, Sunderland, the big kickoff. How was the kind of mood up at the academy yesterday, and how do you feel that things are shaping up with what the start of the new season now, about 24 hours away?
Yeah, Regis Bris was good. He was quite funny, really relaxed, really going in, or certainly that seemed to be the case. He was saying how much he's looking forward to getting started now. And I think he will be, won't he? Because he's had, 6-7 weeks now of friendlies. And for all you can work on implementing the tactics and the style and your preferences and your demands and requirements and whatever else, really, as Dan Neil said, because I spoke to Dan Neil when we were up there yesterday, and as he said yesterday, it's when it starts, really, that it truly shows. And yeah, as we'll get into, I think it's important someone make a fast start, isn't it? A bright start, because you do want to just put last season and the kind of frustrations of early summer behind you. It's important to make a fast start, and I think it'd ease the pressure a little bit if they score goals for the obvious reasons, which I'm sure we'll get to. But before we get to that, Sunderland aren't the biggest show in Cardiff tonight, are they? Who's playing? Because you've had two.
Well, I think it's tomorrow night. It's tomorrow night. Right. Yeah, so I'd be interested to know how Sunderland fans have found it, actually. But I am reliably informed that Billy Joel is playing his one and only UK tour gig at Cardiff's Millennium Stadium tomorrow night. So trying to get a hotel room anywhere near Cardiff for this weekend has been an absolute nightmare. That said, in classic disorganized fashion, kind of tried to do it about 2 or 3 weeks ago. So maybe Sunderland fans who got their backsides into gear a bit earlier in the summer might have been all right. But yeah, it's basically, you cannot get a hotel room for love or money in Cardiff, Newport, Swansea. So I'm going down to Bristol. I think some of the other lads, Phil at the Sunderland Echo, Barnsley, obviously from the radio, I think they're out of Cardiff as well for the exact same reason. So if you are a Sunderland fan who's managed to get a hotel room in Cardiff, A, well done, and B, get the windows open, get a bit of Billy Joel Saturday night.
Right then, before we get to Cardiff and talk about that game, team news. So obviously we know Dan Ballard's missing, and Bris said on Thursday that Leo Hjelde was a doubt. He was the only one who was a doubt. Now, Pierre-Emerick obviously hasn't really featured much in pre-season, so even if he's fit for Saturday, I can't see him. He's not going to start, is he? He might be on the bench, but he's not going to start. And the thing with Hjelde is, for all he's had a good pre-season, a good summer, it's going to be 09 and Elise at centre-half, isn't it?
Yeah.
So that's not the end of the world. And obviously, Ballard will be back. The hope is before the end of August. But I think we've got to start with a centre-forward situation, haven't we? And the fact that here we are on the eve of the new season and they haven't yet managed to sign a striker. It looks like it's going to be Meyenda. But I spoke to Bris after the Marseille game last week, and he confirmed then, I'm really impressed with Meyenda, but he can't play the full season. We can't expect a lad at this stage of his development to lead the line for Sunderland for the full season. And Bris talked pretty openly on Thursday about what he wants from a striker, which I thought was interesting.
Yeah, I mean, if you're giving them the benefit of the doubt, then you would say that, as we know from previous experience, the kind of worst thing that they could do is just panic, get someone in just literally for the sake of getting someone through the door. when it's not going to be right, because the last thing Sunderland need is to add another striker to their squad who's not going to be the right one and not going to score goals. That said, it's not good, is it? It's not good that we're here the day before the start of the season and we're still having the same conversation that we've been having all summer, the same conversation we were having with Mike Dodds, the same conversation we were having with Mike Beale, the same conversation we were having with Tony Mowbray. It's not good enough, really. And you know, you can use the excuses that strikers aren't really moving yet. Clubs are holding on to the players that they've got. We all know that the Mendy thing has become exceptionally complicated because of the ownership situation at Cayenne that was out of Sunderland's hands. So there are mitigating factors in this, but it's 2 or 3 years now. Like, you know, if this was the first time Sunderland had gone for a striker and they've hit these kind of problems, then you'd maybe give them a pass. But I think, you know, I think it's hard not to point pretty serious fingers at Speakman, Louis Dreyfus, and the rest of the recruitment setup for the fact that we're going into the new season and we're still having to make do and mend with the same batch of strikers who the last 3 head coaches have all said are not up to the job. It's a pretty damning indictment, that, however you wrap it up, isn't it?
And I think the problem is, or the kind of issue is, and hopefully this doesn't prove to be the case. Hopefully Bayenda gets off to a flyer this weekend, or Rusin comes in and gets off to a flyer. Regardless, clearly a centre forward is going to arrive. I asked Bris on Thursday, is 1 enough, or does he need 2? Considering there's been talk of Hamia going out, Rusin and Bayenda scored 2 goals between them last year. What if one comes in and doesn't hit the ground running or gets an injury? Is there in an ideal world, would you like 2? But I think the problem you've got is the mood has shifted significantly, hasn't it, over the last 4 or 5 weeks? The appointment of Bris, the kits. I think the kits have made a massive difference.
They've made a difference.
That might sound. I think that's made a big difference, and the new store and just this kind of, I guess, breath of fresh air. And yet, it still feels like there's a little bit of a cloud because of the striker or lack of one, doesn't it? Because that was the obvious priority at the start of the summer. Clearly, you want to get a head coach in first, but then it was, if you're going to only be able to sign 1 player, yeah, we might need another keeper. Yeah, we might need a midfielder to have some more experience. That'd be a striker, didn't it? That's the priority, and that's the frustration.
And I think the annoying thing with fans is that it just is so blindingly obvious. You know, it's been there for so long now. It's been such a running sore. And like, you know, as I keep coming back to, we were sat with Tony Mowbray and he was banging on about it every week. The fact that the strikers just weren't there and he was having to put round pegs in square holes and try and find solutions. The situation's not changed since then, which is, you know, listen, the transfer window, there's 3 weeks left of the transfer window. If we get to a point in September where 1 or 2 strikers have come through the door who are an undoubted upgrade on what there is, then okay, you know, maybe then you'll say, well, the wait was worth it. But it's still bitterly disappointing that we're heading into the season still having this debate, isn't it?
And what you don't want to do is kind of build unneeded pressure on Bris, do you? So early into his tenure, and you know, again, hopefully it doesn't come to this. I fancy Sunderland to get a result this weekend, I think. But if it doesn't go to plan in the first week of the season, then already kind of fingers are being pointed, aren't they? And that's not what you want on the back of such kind of a positive, I don't know whether positive, but promising last few weeks. I think that's the situation, isn't it?
And I mean, listen, you know, Mayenda might score the winner at the weekend, and then he might play again in the Carabao Cup and get another goal, and all of a sudden we're talking about a different scenario and a player who suddenly has a bit of confidence and a bit of a spring in his step. But so you know, it's not. I don't want to make this absolutely doom and gloom, because, as you rightly say, I think there are reasons to be positive ahead of this new season. But there's still no getting away from the fact that the striker situation casts a massive cloud over where we're at going into the first game.
Well, we know it's not going to be Ike Ugbo because he returned to Sheffield Wednesday this week, which was always on the cards.
Yeah, it always felt likely, didn't it, really?
Yeah. So let's watch this space. You mentioned there then the positives. What are the positives? the fact Jack Clark's.
I think the first positive is the fact that all
Clark,
the big names are still there. So
yeah.
Clark's there, Bellingham's there, Dan Neil's there, Anthony Patterson's there, Try Hume's there. Yes, Ballard's injured, but he's signed his new contract. Chris Rigg, yeah. So, again, the caveat has to be the transfer window doesn't close to the end of the month. Will they all still be there then? I certainly don't think at the minute that's nailed on, but they're there at the minute. So that has to be a positive. I think Bris has been a positive. I think he's conducted himself well. He's clearly got ideas and philosophies and coaching plans that he wants to implement. I think there is a plan there now, which clearly there wasn't in the second half of last season, or if there was, then it wasn't working, and it was hard to work out what it was. So in that respect, I think there are reasons to be positive, and you've got to remember, this team got to the playoffs under Tony Mowbray largely without a striker. They were still in and around the top half of the table when Mowbray left last December. There is the core of a squad here that is capable of challenging right up near the top of the championship table. There's absolutely no doubt about that. It's just the striker, which we've done to death. To what extent is there going to be a hangover from last season? We'll have to see that. And is Bris the real deal? Is he going to be this innovative, progressive, youngish coach to lead Sunderland out of the championship? Maybe not at the moment. We just don't know. So there are unknowns, undoubtedly, but I do think there are reasons to be positive. And a lot of that got lost, I think, and with the understandable, just real doom and gloom at the end of last season when everything looked like it was wrong. Well, I don't think everything's wrong by any stretch of the imagination, but let's see how things go, because clearly, as I said, there are a number of unknowns that we won't really find out the answer to until the real business begins.
And just on the striker, back to it, but finally on the striker situation, as I say, when I spoke to Dan Neil up at the Academy of Light on Thursday, we're talking about Mayenda and how impressed he's been with Mayenda in the summer. But Neil was saying, I think the rest of the players, have to take responsibility for the struggles in front of goal last season, because he said we got so used to playing without number 9 in the second half of the previous season that he doesn't think that Sunderland played to the strengths or played to having a number 9 last year. You would hope that with 6-7 weeks of working under Bris that they've touched on that, and that's been worked on. So actually having someone there, a striker there to play off, a striker who is a striker. Mayenda's a centre forward, not like Bellingham, for example, who, although he did a good job there, is a midfielder doing a job as a forward, isn't he? You would hope that's going to have an impact as well. But then it is a huge ask, someone of Mayenda's age and stage of his progression, isn't it, to be leading the line for a team like Sunderland. And that's what Bris, when he was asked specifically on, well, what do you want from a centre forward? He talked about how difficult it was. Well, what do you want? And it was interesting that he said, well, yeah, obviously there's the physical attributes we're looking for, but just as important, he said, was having someone who's got the mentality and mindset to be able to lead the line and be the number 9 for a club of Sunderland's stature. And I thought that was interesting. Maybe that was an indication that they've learned the lessons of last year when Amir came in and given the number 9 shirt, and Mayenda and Rusin. It was a big ask, wasn't it, for them 3 to come in and hit the ground running with no one to lean on or with no one to learn from. Maybe there was higher hopes for Mason Burstow. I suspect that was probably the case.
Yeah, and that brings us back to another kind of running point, isn't it? Which is the experience within the squad, and is there enough championship know-how, or at least know-how that can be easily translated across to the championship? Because you're right, Sunderland had 4 strikers last season, but none of them had any meaningful championship experience or pedigree, and I think that showed, because you're absolutely right. It's not just that you need to be able to put the ball in the net. You need to be able to lead the line. You need to be able to link play. You need to be able to deal with everything that goes with being the main man at Sunderland. And it does take a certain character and a certain ability level to be able to do that. And we haven't seen that really since Ross Stewart left, have we? Let's be absolutely honest. So that's going to be interesting. I mean, we talk about strikers. managers will say, head coaches will say, players will say, and they'll be right to say, it's not all on the strikers. Jack Clarke, Patrick Roberts, Joe Bellingham. There's goals there without a shadow of a doubt. Alan Brown has scored goals through his career. Chris Reed can pop up with a goal. Dan Neil can pop up with a goal, So it's not all on the striker, but I think it's really, really hard to get promoted out of this division if you don't have a centre forward who is going to be scoring you 15, 20 goals. Because if you haven't got that, then to share enough goals around the rest of the squad is a big, big ask, because you're basically then saying all of your midfielders have to get into double figures. Well, some midfielders will. And Jack Clarke is, as we've seen, absolutely capable of scoring double figures. Patrick Roberts should be. We haven't really seen it it's goal scoring that often at Sunderland, but he should be. Bellingham should be. But for them all to do it is a really big ask. So you do need a striker to carry some of that load.
You mentioned experience there and leadership. Well, they've confirmed this morning, Sunderland, that Luke O'Nien's club captain this year. Dan Neil is team captain. And then the duo will front a new 6-player leadership team selected by Regis Bris, Sunderland, which also includes Alan Brown, Dan Ballard, Job, and Try Hume. It's bonkers, really, that Job's in there, isn't it? At 18,
yeah.
18 years old.
You do forget how young he is, yeah.
But there's no surprises there, really, is there?
And it's the way
picks. I mean,
it's the way it's going, isn't it? Other clubs operate like this, where rather than put all the onus on one player, it's a leadership group, and they're the kind of bridge between Bris and the dressing room, and they're the voices. They're self-policing in an awful lot of ways. I think it makes a lot of sense, because I think now, the idea of one captain leading everything, being the rabble-rouser. I mean, if nothing else, just off the pitch with all the commercial pressures and stuff, they're for one person to take all of that on their shoulders, I think is a really big ask. So I think there's a lot of sense in what they're doing. And yes, the identity of the captain is important to a degree, but I think, as without lapsing too much into cliches, I think anyone who's ever achieved anything in sport will say you need a dressing room full of leaders. And, that's clearly been an issue and a question levelled at Sunderland. Have there been enough big voices? Have there been enough leaders? Well, you say that Job's interested on that list. Yeah, he is, just because of his age. I think the fact that Alan Brown is straight in there is interesting as well, because, he's come in as a kind of shift in Sunderland's transfer policy, that finally have decided we're going to bring in a player who's got shed loads of championship experience, who's coming towards the not the end, but the latter half of his career. And straight away, he's in that leadership group and is clearly going to be a really big voice in the dressing room this season. And I think that's almost an acceptance of a lot of what has been thrown at Sunderland, that they went too far in one direction in terms of overloading the squad with young players. And at least we're starting to see that addressed a bit.
What do you reckon then this weekend? You're going to Cardiff as we discussed. What's your kind of feeling? What are your thoughts on the game, on Cardiff, on Sunderland's chances this weekend?
Well, you'd rather be at home, wouldn't you? I think you'd like to start any season at home. I think that's a given. And if you're not at home, then probably a localish away day, so it's an easy one for the fans, etc. I mean, straight away, 12:30 on a Saturday lunchtime. Cardiff. I mean, fair play to all the Sunderland fans who are going to be at that game, because that's diabolical, really. But that's a whole new video, isn't it? Because we're going to see a season of that with these new kickoff times and everything. So, but that said, I think it's a reasonably good game, because I don't think Cardiff are particularly good, and I think they're still in a bit of a state of flux. I at the moment would have Cardiff as probably one of my 3 to go down at the end of this season. So just by that very nature, I think Sunderland are more than capable of getting a result there. I've not been massively impressed by kind of what Cardiff have done. I think there's question marks over the manager, the head coach, what the direction the club's going in. So I'm with you. I think Sunderland will win. I fancy Sunderland to get a result. I do, notwithstanding the fact that my ender's going to be leading the line, and we need to see exactly what he's capable of in a meaningful championship fixture again. I think behind him, I think that 3 of Clarke, Bellingham, Roberts, if they're on song, I think they'll cause the Cardiff defence all kinds of problems.
And the season as a whole, if it's not a prediction as such, then what's your feeling? It's so hard to say.
It's difficult because there are so many unknowns, and without yet again treading over old ground, it still feels to a certain degree like the Sunderland season is going to stand or fall on whoever walks through the door as a striker before the end of the month. If Sunderland can get a centre forward in who is going to play pretty much every week and is going to end the season with 15 goals, then I think they'll be right there in the playoff mix. I worry whether Jack Clark will go. I still think of all the names and all the ones, he's probably the one that's most likely to leave before the end of the window. And that will leave a really big gap because, he is talismanic for this Sunderland team, isn't he? He's the one who gets them out of trouble. He's the one that scores a goal from nowhere. If you don't have that, then that's a lot that would need replacing. But as I keep coming back to, Patterson, Hume, Ballard, Neil, Bellingham, Brown now, Rigg, Roberts, maybe Clark, a striker. That's the absolute makings of a championship squad that is more than good enough to be up there challenging. There's just question marks over who's going to be the striker. Is Clark going to be there? Is Bris championship ready? Is he up to it? Is he at the standard that Speakman and the rest of the executive team clearly think he is? So there are question marks, but I still come back to this is a side that made the playoffs 2 seasons ago, and we're
right in the mix.
Yeah, and we're in the mix.
Four things went south clearly and significantly and rapidly. They were right there again.
What about you? What would be your take?
I think like the probably like the wise punt would be 9th, 10th, 11th. But I think they have a high ceiling. If that said, I think if things didn't go to plan, if they don't get a centre forward in who hits the ground running, if Bris doesn't adapt as quickly as what someone would hope, then I think the kind of hangover of last season could quickly kick in again, and things could get difficult. But if it, all those players you mentioned there, 4, 5, 6 players who'd strengthen any championship squad, wouldn't they? Most championship teams. So if those kind of questions get answered, if they get a centre forward who scores goals, maybe even 2, if Bris's style and kind of demands take hold quickly, then I think Sunderland have the quality to absolutely be in the mix. So bottling out of it, the kind of middle ground.
I think that's fair, and I think you make a good point there. That this summer, more than any other, really, it feels like Sunderland could have a very high ceiling or a very low floor. I think that's fair. I think even most fans would agree with that at the moment. That things could go very, very well, but as you've also alluded to, it's not hard to foresee a scenario where things become pretty difficult pretty quickly if the signings don't come through the door and if Bris isn't able to hit the ground running and everything. So again, it feels like a bit of a cop out, but I think they could be very good or they could be very bad.
Let's see. Let's hope it's very good. Well, safe travels to anyone who's making the trip this weekend. As Scott said, fantastic effort. First season regardless. I know we all head to the first game of the season full of hope and belief, but still to be making that trip ahead of a 12:30 Saturday game is a monumental effort. So fair play, and hopefully you come back with a result, 3 points, at least one, and enjoy the weekend. Thanks for watching, and thanks to our sponsors and partners, as Scott said at the start, Fans Museum, Cospex Opticians. Do subscribe if you haven't already. If you're listening on your podcast channels, rate and review. Enjoy your weekend, and we'll be back next week to look back on the opening games of the season. Take care.